All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Lesperance. I go by the name of My Man Richard. Welcome to A Better Lifestyle. Today, I have the pleasure to have Patricia Smith Griffin with me. Welcome, Patricia, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, tell everybody, who is Patricia Smith Griffin?
Wow. Okay, so my man Richard, that is a loaded question. It seems as though I have lived many lives. I started my career in radio. Um, many people, their first jobs might be in fast food. My first job was at our student radio station, WDPS in Dayton, Ohio. And from there, I went to Ohio University, that we boast is the best school of broadcasting in the country. So I've worked in music radio, I've worked in an urban format, I've worked in a news talk format. I even had a show on country radio as well. Um, all the while, I've been married, having children, and by the time we had our third child, I decided that I needed to do something different. I wanted to be a different kind of mother. With three kids and a dog, it was time to be all in. But it didn't take long for me to miss radio. So I started a company called the Women's Radio Network, and we produced radio shows, features, and vignettes that we called reality radio. We talked about women's challenges and triumphs and how they got over, how they overcame, how they got through. So from there, I have worked in news radio, American Urban Radio Networks. And it was around that time when I guess I sort of kind of came to a crossroads. I had a couple of projects that I was working on. Another one that I often say that was really good too. And I can assure you, we'd have been talking about that one as well. But I had a spiritual advisor, and I was talking to her about whether to pursue that particular topic and path, or whether to conquer my family story. Um, and she asked me a question that became quite profound, which was, is there anyone else in your family that can do this research and tell this story? And I answered, not like I can. Not like I can, because what we've done with the Legacy of Charity's Children, which is our multi-generational podcast, what we've done is, I guess, more or less combined my life experiences and all these various aspects of broadcasting. Um, because while working in radio, I also worked in the talent industry. Uh, did commercial talent, photography. I did runway modeling as well. So it's been a compilation of all of these experiences that we have brought to our podcast, The Legacy of Charity's Children, in telling our family story, my family story. The podcast starts in 1802 with our matriarch, Charity Davis Caesar Broady. Uh, we have been blessed to have a multi-generational archive, artifacts, pictures, letters, journals from various generations within the family that helped tell the story. I guess I can say it helped frame the story, because with every letter, every journal, every picture, there's research that goes with that, that confirms family oral history as well as family written history.
So, what would be the the main drive for you doing this, and the main drive, and what led you into that direction?
Our very first podcast, our mission statement is, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. And in that podcast, I talk about my mother's journey in telling our family story and, excuse me, and in preserving the multi-generational archive. And can I just say, Richard, as a caveat here, that I almost decided not to do this interview today. We are on the heels of the American presidential election, and I am surrounded by suffragists. These are suffragists behind me. Charity Broady was in Akron, Ohio at the Am I Not a Woman speech that Sojourner Truth gave. Julia Galloway Higgins is featured here on the 100th anniversary of Ohio suffragists. My mother and my grandmother were both political activists. The day that my grandmother died, I was passing out campaign literature with my mother and my sister. So I come to this election from a unique place. And I'm not ready to talk about it, only to preface this conversation with it, because if you see a tear here or there, I need you to know that I'm going through the stages of grief. I'm going through generations of responsibility and perseverance and hope that is not dashed, but it's just a little raw today. It's just a little raw. So I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I tell the story of my mother's struggle to preserve her family home and to preserve our family's artifacts that include our family's manumission papers, our actual papers that released our family from slavery in 1863. So her struggle to hold on to these things and preserve them was dashed. And if you've never seen the results of a real heartbreak, it's something that your life would be complete without, because we watched our mother in 6 months' time go from a healthy woman to being gone. And in that moment, as I say in the podcast, I inherited this destiny, which was to tell our family story, because yes, there have been treasures that have been lost, stolen, or strayed. But as I said to my mother, the value is in our story. The value is in our perseverance. And the more research I do, the more research that comes to me, the more I am, the more pride I hold in my American heritage.
What is the Charity Children Project?
The Charity's Children Project, Charity Broady being our matriarch. Um, the moniker Charity's Children was actually coined by my mother. It literally who we are. Charity was the mother of 13 children. She was a conductor in the Dayton, Ohio Underground Railroad. She was also a nurse, which made her an invaluable asset for the enslaved who passed through the Miami Valley of Dayton, Ohio. She was mother to 13 children and was had two husbands, lived to be 98 years old. So a lot of life, a lot of lifetimes in there. I remember as a young child, I'm often asked, when did our family begin telling us the story about Charity Broady? When did I learn about Charity Broady? And my answer is, when did I learn my name? I have never not known who she was. I've never not known what her contributions were to Ohio and the Miami Valley. And I don't think that it would go too far as to say the world. Um, so it became our mission to share her inspiring story, to preserve the multi generational artifacts that we have. And to do that, we formed the Charities Children Project. And it's through the project that we do special events and lecture series that not only tell our family story, but also teach and show other families how to do what we did, what is important to save in your family artifacts and archive, how you should store and save this. I think nothing has been more important than that, or prevalent than that, than in this generation. When I stop and think about how long I have worked in the industry, and in that closet back there are reel to reels, there are carts, there are flash drives, there are floppy disks. So I think about all these methods and ways that we have communicated and stored information within my lifetime. I sometimes fear that if we don't consistently keep up, or if we don't have those hard copies, that some of that information will be lost. So that's some of the things that we do in our special events, as as well as tell our family story.
I know you talk about the story power. Uh, what uh, your in regards to Charity? I know she was a bold woman. Can you talk a little bit about what she overcame? I know there's a story with
Yes.
the governor. So I don't know if you could
Oh,
share that.
okay. So you want to hear the governor's story? Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a couple. Okay, so it's a couple. So I have to tell you about the story of Africatown. Africatown was Dayton, Ohio's first Black community. It was located in an area of the city that was called Seeley's Ditch, which, of course, was where all the factory and city runoff was. Well, around 1830s in Ohio, emancipated and those who were men who were escaping enslavement settled in that Ohio area, and they began to build something that was called the Miami Erie Canals. Well, the Miami Erie Canals transformed the area, and it made Dayton a thriving metropolis. And the men also did that same type of rehabilitation in their neighborhood, Seeley's Ditch. So Seeley's Ditch became a sought after property. Um, and then at that time, there became an uprising of pro slavery mob attacks between the latter part of the 1830s and into 1841, that culminated in the attacks on Africatown, where Dayton's first Black community was burned to the ground. 326 Black residents in a population of about 6,000, just over 6,000. After Africatown, after the attacks on Africatown, there were only 26 Black residents that survived and or stayed. Many left the city. Charity Broady was among those who stayed. Charity's husband, John, refused to stay. So John left. He came and went for a while. We've got proof of that because there are babies that were born. But we have several written histories from that time that attest that he left. And in upcoming podcasts, we have some more information because we found out where John went. So we've got more information coming on that. So Charity was left alone in that city at that time, the mother of about 13. One of her older sons from her first marriage got into an incident in got into an incident in Cincinnati, Ohio. Uh, that is also, stay tuned because that is coming up in season 2, and it is a juicy story. But he got into this incident in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he was sentenced to life in prison. So around 1860. Now, mind you, this is when the Civil War is brewing. Charity is without a husband. She goes to the governor of Ohio. She goes to the prosecutor that convicted her son and said he has served enough time, and she demanded that they release him. The prosecutor filed a petition to the judges that sentenced her son, James, and James was released. It is truly a testament to her commitment to freedom, having been born free because her mother was indigenous. She could not be enslaved. Having been born free, she was committed to freeing those who were enslaved. And it even extended to the boldness of demanding the freedom of her child. So in season 2 of The Legacy of Charity's Children, that is out in the coming months, you will hear the story of James Davis. It's called Let My People Go.
How many episodes you guys plan to release? Because I was checking the podcast and I only saw one episode. I think it was in July. So how many do you guys plan to release?
We released the prologue in July, which was an actual account of what happened in Africa Town from a survivor. We had uncovered Joseph Wheeler's actual account of what happened. Season 2 is forthcoming. I will tell you that this has been an interesting year for our team. We have been met with some incredible opportunities that have sidetracked our podcast efforts, but we are ready to go and quite inspired. So we're actually going to divide season 2 into 2 seasons. We had prepared a dozen episodes for this season. However, we're going to release 6 episodes because we want to do a special event that is tied to season 3. And so we're going to save the best for last. We'll do that in season 3.
Why do you think knowing your family history is important?
I will tell you, Richard, because the more research that I do, the more history I find. It is incredibly interesting to me, the threads of similarity that run within the family. Talents, likes, dislikes, strong-willed children, and even our ways and methods of dealing with our strong-willed children seem to be come from familiar traits as well. I'm reminded of when I left Dayton, Ohio. It's coming up on about 20 years ago is when I moved. And my home had been the meeting place, the gathering place for family and friends. So it was kind of a big deal that we pulled up stake and moved to Pennsylvania. And so as I was leaving, my great niece, who was an absolute regular at Aunt Pat's house, she was crying and tears were coming down her face. And I kissed her tears and I picked her up and I sang a song to her and I said a poem and I told her, I said, now when I come back, I want you to be able to recite that poem to me. Now, as I was doing this, my brother and sister were standing over on the side, and they said, "How did you know to do that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "That's what grandmother used to do when she would leave us. When we would be sad, she would give us a poem and a song to learn so that we would have it prepared for her by the next time we got back." Now, Richard, this was something that was obviously in my subconscious, but it was just for me in that moment, the natural thing to do. Um, Family traits like fostering children. I talk about how we are Charity's children by love and by blood. Um, my great aunt Rita fostered over 100 children. My sister worked for over 30 years in foster care and child welfare. My niece is an adoptive mother of two. My aunt, who is my namesake, she adopted six children. And Julia Higgins was a foster mother as well. And we know that Charity Broady fostered children too. So these familiar traits, and wow, Julia Higgins did more than just foster children. She was one of the founders of a home in Dayton, Ohio. It was called the Mother Holloway Home for Unwed Mothers and Colored Orphans. This would be in the 1920s that this was founded. So these kinds of things, knowing your family history, sometimes will define for you who you are and what motivates you in ways that you may not even be cognizant of.
Yeah. Okay. What's the end goal of the project, everything that you're doing right now at the moment?
That is a multifaceted question, because my daughter recently came to me here in my office as she saw me diligently working. And she said to me, she said, "Ma, you know, you work on this as though this is something that you're going to finish." She said, "This is not something that you're going to finish. This is not something that you're supposed to finish. You're supposed to do as the generations did before you, which is the best that you can in preserving and promoting this story within your generation and passing a lit torch to the next generation to continue to tell the story." Because we're living in a country where diverse opinions, not even diverse opinions, but where history is being ignored and denied, and where facts are being brought into question. I remember telling my 4-year-old that difference between a truth and a lie, and the truth is what really happened, and a lie is what you would like people to think. So we will continue to do what the generations have done before us, which is to tell the truth, our truth, from our perspective.
What would you like to say to a woman out there in regards, because I know uh, the lineage, it was going backwards 12 generation, and it's 12 generation of women. So
Yeah.
what would you have to say about that in regards to that woman, and for women to be empowered and all that?
Um, Something that I'm often asked is
And sorry to cut you off, and not just for Black women, just women in general.
just women. Exactly. Exactly. Women. Something that I'm often asked is how we have been able to trace this history so far back through the women, because women marry, because women change their names. Um, and something that has been unique in our family is that the women use their maiden names. They're not hyphenated. They use their maiden names within their names, and they use them in their business and their public life, and they use them with their children. It is I think about my Aunt Rosalie and a artifact that I recently read about the challenges that she was having when she attempted to start a teachers union in Dayton, Ohio. She was part of starting a teachers union in Dayton, Ohio, and someone told her, um, "Remember that you are a Higgins," recalling her mother, who was a suffragist, and it's just that I would say is probably the most important thing is use your name. Use your name and maintain your identity and tell your family story. Tell your family story, tell what you know to those within your generation. And no, they don't want to hear it. Some of the research that I am doing now, I know that my mother and cousin Betty Jean have talked about this with me. I know that I have heard this before, but I wasn't tuned in. I wasn't tuned in and I wasn't turned on to it at that point in time. But it's not lost. But it's not lost. So you keep telling the family story. You keep telling your story. One of the things that I want women to do is to write your life. It's a and it may be as easy as going back into some of your Facebook posts or your blog posts that are poignant, and print that out. Print out the things that tell your story, that talk about your trials, about how you navigated your way through certain situations. Because believe it or not, that is history. That is what history is. Why you moved to this particular area, why you migrated to that particular job, or why you chose that particular high school to go to or college to go to. All of those things tell your family story and are window into who you are, and also a window into the time and place in which you've existed. And that is history. That's valuable. But I think it's important to tell your story even when nobody's listening.